Good morning, my beautiful babes and babies. I'm your resident active advocate, feeling rather southern this morning for some reason. I wanted to talk today about the view of equality. I did not include this on my series on the gaze because, as you probably noticed, the gaze is a rather negative device, often creating the gap and widening the gap between the self and the other. This gap of subject and object, the I and the you, has a very useful evolutionary function, which is why it's still here. But I mean, just logically speaking, you know, this is me, whereas this is my water bottle. But do I see the water bottle as itself negative by design or positive but by design? Not necessarily. It's just a tool. It's, its own thing. When it comes to human beings, it gets a little more complicated, obviously. So I've been talking about the goal of seeing the other as equal to oneself. And a lot of the time, when it comes to relationships between disabled and non-disabled people, there's this sort of mental gap that we create of I am better than you because you have something, quote, wrong with you. You know that I'm not supportive of that view. I have been very vocal about that throughout this whole series. But what I really want to put to bed today is that not only does this negative relationship of inequality not benefit anyone, but it also sort of drives from the mind of the quote abled person that it is even possible to be friends with a person with a disability, because society says, what do we do about that person? Which is the same as to say, how do we handle this problem? When you start viewing disability and people with disabilities as problems, they become objectified. As I say, there is a relationship between subject, I, and object, water bottle. But when it comes to people, the subject and the object are intrinsically equal in that we are all human, right? At least philosophize with me here. The whole goal of this series is to narrow the gap between self and other in terms of this unequal view. I want to foster understanding because if you don't understand a thing, it's very much easier to see it as unequal to oneself, primarily as inferior to oneself. When you start seeing people not as problems or as the thing to be figured out, and when you start seeing them as people, that narrows the gap between the quote superior and inferior, between the self and the other. Self and other, useful. Superior, inferior, not useful. Please don't think that that's useful, because the whole strata of Western society is based on high, middle, low. And usually that comes with money and with prestige, but those two, anyway, are not necessarily intertwined. It also comes with gender, sex, race, language, ability versus disability, all this different stuff that keeps this pyramid intact. I don't like pyramids. I don't like the dichotomy between superior and inferior. None of it works, because all it does is separate us from one another as human beings and creates this illusion of I am better than you because. Okay, but there's not just one trait to any human being. You might be, quote, better than someone because of this, but you're going to be worse than them in this other aspect. I've said before in this series, ask me to fix a car and I will be out to sea. Ask me to sing for you, and sure, awesome, because I'm a good singer, right? But Again, these are all just one trait of the individual. There's only ever the whole, honestly. When you reduce a person to one single trait, you are reducing them to an object. So when you approach the person with the disability with the mindset immediately, because you've been trained to do it, at least intrinsically, of they need help, then it's not necessarily a view to equality, is it? Because would you approach someone of, you know, equal height or of the same sex or of the same gender who is not disabled and automatically think, oh, they need help, because I am the knight in shining armor who is going to come forth and rescue this person from whatever situation I perceive them as being in. I've been talking lately about the idea of consent and the idea of communication. These are both foundational to any good relationship. These are romantic relationships, these are friendly relationships, these are business relationships, all these different relationships that require the same elements. The relationship between self and other always require these elements. How could you ever make any friends if you didn't see that friend as equal to yourself? How could you ever make any enemies if you didn't see that enemy as, to some degree, equal to yourself? Because they wouldn't be an enemy if you didn't see them as a threat, therefore as intelligent, maybe. The whole idea of creating the equality mindset is to see this human being as having equal potential to you, though in different ways, possibly. They could be, say, a wheelchair user, whereas you're able to walk on your legs. But what can they do that you cannot do? You're not going to know that if automatically you stop at the assumption of this person is inferior to me because, and never go forward from there. Never get to know the person on their level. I strongly advocate for getting to know people as individuals, not as groups. This is the whole idea of real Western individualism. We're a very individualistic culture. The East, much more collectivist, which is fine, but they do it in a different way than how we do it. To us, collectivism is basically, at least to a person with a negative mindset about these things, gathering all the people of one group together and saying an overarching thing about them. All women are blank. All men are blank. All people with disabilities are blank. If you can fill that blank with a negative term, you have just objectified an entire group of people. And that is not healthy in creating healthy relationships. I think we know this, but evolution has taught us to be afraid of the other, and politics has rammed that fear into our heads. And yes, I am very passionate about this. Thanks for noticing. So, in order to undo this view, we need to get to know each other as individuals, not as groups. When you walk up to someone and see them as a representative of their quote group, you're not doing yourself or them any favors. Don't walk into a relationship with prejudices, with assumptions that cover with a blanket that entire person's experience and life and being. You can't do that. You especially can't do that to an individual, because individuals stand on their own merits and their own faults. Don't lump people together, and don't see people as intrinsically superior or inferior to yourself. Yes, this applies to superior as well, without getting to know what they are good at, what they are bad at, what they are capable of, what they are not capable of, how they work as an individual separate from the group that you mentally put them in. And that is going to be my video for today. I hope I didn't offend too many people, and even if I did, maybe you can learn something. I don't know. That's your choice. Thank you for your lovely attention and participation. I will see you tomorrow's Friday. Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye. Mwah.